This program is brought to you by Link TV for educational and non-commercial use only. Mosaic, a daily news program from Link TV, presents a selection of news reports from independent and state-controlled broadcasters from throughout the Middle East.
ونبدأ بالأحداث في أفغانستان حيث قال حلف شمال الأطلسي.
NATO said today that its forces launched an air raid on northern Afghanistan targeting 2 oil tankers that Taliban fighters have seized.
قد استولوا عليها في وقت سابق.
وأشار مصدر أمني أفغاني إلى أن الغارة تسببت.
An Afghan security source indicated that the raid caused a big explosion, killing dozens of people, including civilians in the Kunduz province. The source added that the death toll may reach 90 persons.
ينتظر هؤلاء الأفغان أمام المستشفى لمعرفة أخبار ذويهم الذين أصيبوا.
These Afghan people are waiting outside the hospital for news of the conditions of their relatives who were severely burned in the explosion caused by NATO's air raid on the 2 oil tankers. The bombing killed dozens of people and severely burned many others. The international forces in Afghanistan did not deny that they bombed the 2 oil tankers, claiming that their commander in Kunduz ordered it. However, NATO said that they did not know whether there were civilians among the dead because the 2 oil tankers were in the possession of Taliban fighters when they were bombed. The bombing occurred in Anjurba, a town in the Kunduz province in northern Afghanistan, after Taliban fighters seized 2 oil tankers that were on their way to the German forces' headquarters in the region. Local Afghan officials pointed out that one of the 2 oil tankers drove off a cliff at a valley and the Taliban fighters began to distribute the fuel to the residents there for free. According to them, this was the reason behind the civilians' deaths. This incident has created new burdens for the international forces in Afghanistan, which were responsible for the death of more civilians in NATO's air operations. Incidents like this have led to tense relations between NATO and the Afghan government in the past, as well as increased resentment among the Afghan people against foreign forces. The new commander of the ISAF forces, United States General Stanley McChrystal, issued orders 2 months ago that planes should not attack any target unless they have verified 100% that civilians will not be harmed. The occurrence of this incident in Kunduz shows that the Taliban's activities are no longer exclusively within the south, but that they are spreading throughout Afghanistan, including within the north, which had been quiet until very recently.
Joining me is Al Jazeera correspondent Waliullah Shahim, who reports from the road between Kabul and Kunduz. Waliullah, is there new information about this air attack?
In fact, there are reports saying that the death toll may reach 120. Most of them are children who gathered to transport free fuel. This is what the Taliban fighters told us. A Taliban spokesman also denied that any Taliban fighters were killed during the air attack on the oil tankers in the Kunduz province. This shows that the Taliban has intensive activities in this area. Second, these oil tankers were transporting oil to NATO forces in northern provinces of Afghanistan. This means that the northern and southern supply routes that link Afghanistan to Pakistan continue to face a great deal of security problems. Taliban fighters are very active in these areas. They have always intercepted NATO supply routes in different areas in the south and east, but recently NATO forces have used supply routes in the north, which links Afghanistan to Central Asian countries. NATO wanted to transport food supplies and fuel to its forces in Afghanistan. This means that the route has also become dangerous for foreign forces, which need fuel and food supplies.
Thank you, Waliullah Shahim, reporting from the Kabul-Kunduz region.
The Iraqi Prime Minister Noor al-Maliki described the intervention by some neighbors in Iraqi internal affairs as an act of aggression. Al-Maliki further said that his government may demand that the United Nations Security Council form an international criminal court. Hazem Mahmoud reports.
The relations between Syria and Iraq appear to be heading for escalation. Meanwhile, Turkey said that the Iraqi and Syrian foreign ministers have agreed to meet in Ankara at the beginning of next week to discuss the crisis facing Iraq and Syria. In another development, the Iraqi government continues to call for the formation of an international criminal court for the suspects linked in the latest bombings in Baghdad. In addition, the Iraqi government called on the Security Council to list state sponsors of terrorism under the mandate of Chapter 7 of the UN Charter. The Iraqi government said that they will inform the world's ambassadors in Baghdad of the role Syria is playing in Iraq's violence.
The Iraqi government reserves the legal rights to take any necessary action in order to help protect its internal front. Iraq has the right to defend itself from the terrorist attacks that are targeting the Iraqi people and the country's infrastructure.
The Iraqi-Syrian crisis is casting its shadow on the Iraqi internal political front. The news comes after some political blocs opposing the escalation against Syria are facing sharp criticism from the government and other political groups.
The Iraqi government wants to pursue international channels in order to expose the terrorists. What's the reason behind this political rhetoric? We started hearing from this group or that group, or from this leader or that leader. Some are assuming the role of a defense attorney to represent Syria at the expense of the Iraqi people.
The idea of punishing the state sponsors of terrorism by the UN Security Council may affect more than one neighboring country, as Iraq is accusing countries along with Syria of supporting and launching armed attacks on Iraqi soil. The relations between Iraq and Syria over the latest bomb attacks in Baghdad will likely continue to deteriorate, perhaps until next week when the Iraqi foreign minister meets his Syrian counterpart in Ankara. Hazem Mahmoud, Baghdad, Future TV.
3 ministers from Iraq, Syria, and Turkey held a meeting in Ankara to discuss the sharing of water from the Tigris and Euphrates rivers.
The sharing of water from the Tigris and the Euphrates rivers was the focus of talks in a three-way meeting that was held in Ankara. The meeting included Turkish Energy Minister Taner Yildiz, Syria's Irrigation Minister Nader Albuni, and Iraq's Minister of Water Resources Latif Rashid. Yildiz told Baghdad and Damascus that Ankara was already too overstretched with water and power demands and could not raise the flow of water any further. He further said that Turkey is allowing more water than the required level. Yildiz added that his country recognizes the needs of Syria and Iraq for water, but it doesn't have much of it. He confirmed that his country can't increase the flow of water too much, saying that the current level is appropriate for both Syria and Iraq. The Turkish, Iraqi, and Syrian ministers said that they will study the issue of seasonal monitoring of water flow from the Euphrates River to Damascus and Baghdad, in addition to the issue of drought.
We need more water from our neighbors, especially from the Republic of Turkey and the Arab Republic of Syria.
Baghdad and Damascus have for years demanded a more fair distribution of water resources. Damascus has accused Ankara of restraining water supplies, especially during summer, due to the launch of the Gap Irrigation Project and the building of dams on the banks of the Tigris and Euphrates rivers, as part of the Anandal development.
Syria has sincere intentions toward our Iraqi brothers. Syria has started to let 69% of the water from the Euphrates River to flow to Iraq. That was more than 58% previously agreed between the two neighbors.
According to an agreement between Turkey and Syria, Ankara is to allow the flow of water from the Euphrates to Syria at an average of 500 cubic meters per second annually. The Euphrates River, which is 2,800 kilometers long, originates in Turkey and flows through Syria and Iraq.
This is President Hugo Chavez's second visit to Syria. Journalists from different media agencies, the media team that is accompanying President Chavez, as well as the Syrian and Venezuelan delegations are all awaiting Syrian President Bashar al-Assad and his Venezuelan counterpart to arrive to this press conference, which we are going to air directly.
هنا أعيد أكرر مرة أخرى إن دولة إسرائيل.
Here, I reiterate, the state of Israel has been transformed into a state that kills nations. It has become the enemy of peace, and its wars may go as far as Latin America. It attacks nations in Latin America. Israel has been used as a tool for implementing imperialist policies. We demand that the Golan Heights be returned to the Syrian people, the Syrian government, and the Syrian Republic. We demand that the unjust siege imposed upon the Palestinian people be stopped.
لسوريا للشعب السوري وللحكومة السورية والجمهورية السورية.
To what degree will the Palestinian people continue to be targeted? Do you know former President Carter? I think you know him. I personally know him. He visited Caracas during the presidential elections. I think that Carter is an honorable and trustworthy man. He came back to Venezuela after the failed coup against me. He participated in the mediation talks with evil and crazy forces in Venezuela. We have established a friendship with Carter based on transparency and honesty. I saw him on Al Jazeera television in Gaza. Carter was almost crying when he saw the destruction that was caused by the evil state of Israel against the Palestinian people in Gaza. What is the U.S. saying now? What does President Obama have to say? Why doesn't President Obama support his words with actions? Why doesn't he stop the military and economic aid to the criminal state of Israel? If he really wants to support his words with actions, he should stop sending aid to Israel. We demand him to do that. Otherwise, we can say that Obama is nothing but a good speaker. This is what President Obama is about. He says everything with a smile. He gives good speeches, but he's still a president of an imperialist country. He attacks, kills, stages coups. He attacks Venezuela and Latin America. I told President Assad, Obama signed an agreement to establish 7 military bases in Colombia. He only wants to build 7 military bases. You know very well what military bases mean. The U.S. wants to transform Colombia into the Israel of Latin America. We have exposed this scandal, which we will always do. They want to attack countries and prevent them from uniting. They want to plant divisions, kill and destroy. We will not allow that to happen. Therefore, we say that we are fighting the same battle, the battle that will determine our future. As Che Guevara said, and as we reiterate, Latin America will win. We came here to win.
In a move that's already sparking much controversy, Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu plans to announce his approval of hundreds of new housing units in the West Bank before considering a temporary settlement freeze. IBA's Ellie Wogelanter brings us the details.
Prime Minister Netanyahu.
In an apparent snub of President Obama's public demand for a total settlement freeze, Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu plans to approve hundreds of new housing units in West Bank settlements. Netanyahu stressed that once the construction is approved, he would then consider a temporary freeze on condition that the building of some 2,500 others currently under construction be completed. The freeze would not include East Jerusalem. It is unclear if Washington had prior knowledge of Israel's intentions. Kurt Hoyer, spokesman for the U.S. Embassy in Tel Aviv, said Washington would be unlikely to accept anything, quote, contrary to the spirit of negotiations they've been undertaking, adding that he was doubtful the U.S. had signed off on the Israeli decision. Senior Palestinian negotiator Saeb Erekat said such a proclamation by Israel will be destructive. I think the only thing that will be suspended by this announcement is the peace process, Erekat said. Ofer Pines-Paz, a Dovish MK whose Labour Party is part of Netanyahu's coalition, said issuing new building permits was unnecessary and damaging. I fear that issuing new permits will foil the next step, a settlement freeze that would build confidence and allow negotiations to resume, he said. The construction is expected to be centered in the main settlement block areas, which Israel hopes to retain after any peace deal. There have been signs of a settlement slowdown even without the announcement of an official freeze. Government statistics released yesterday show that new construction in West Bank settlements fell by 1/3 in the first half of 2009. Ellie Wogelanter, IBA News.
Netanyahu's plan to approve hundreds of new homes in the West Bank will not set well with France. Just yesterday, French Foreign Minister Bernard Kouchner, in talks with Palestinian Authority President Mahmoud Abbas, said international efforts to achieve a Middle East peace agreement will not succeed without a freeze in settlement activity. Kouchner told Abbas that he discussed with the Obama administration a French-Egyptian proposal for an international meeting to deal with the peace process. Abbas insisted the new American initiative will not get off the ground unless there is a declaration regarding a halt in Israeli settlement activity. The French government will do all it can to secure the release of kidnapped IDF soldier Gilad Shalit. This according to French ambassador to Israel, Christophe Bigot, who today visited the Shalit family in their home in Mitzveh Chila. The ambassador brought Gilad's parents a letter from French President Nicolas Sarkozy in honor of Gilad's 23rd birthday, which took place last week. Bigot said the French government is ready and willing to act in any way and with whoever it takes to bring about the release of Shalit, who also holds French citizenship. Gilad's father, Noam, expressed gratitude and complimented French President Sarkozy for all of his efforts. Meanwhile, reports continue to circulate in the Arab media that a deal over the release of Shalit in exchange for Palestinian security prisoners is close to being finalized. Hamas chief Khaled Masha will reportedly arrive in Cairo this weekend to take part in the last stage of negotiations. The Air Force bombed a Gaza tunnel overnight. Military officials said terrorists plan to use the tunnel to infiltrate into Israel to carry out attacks against civilians or IDF soldiers. The tunnel entrance was located in a home approximately 1.5 kilometers from the border security fence. The operation was a joint endeavor between the Air Force and the Shin Bet Security Service. Palestinians confirmed the attack but said there were no injuries.
Ever wonder why you don't see shows like Mosaic on any other channel? It's called independent media. That means that Mosaic will never have to answer to an advertiser or government funder. But in order to continue doing this, we need your support. And this is the one time every year that we fundraise specifically for Mosaic. Our goal is $200,000 and we still have a long way to go. We know we can do it because we know how much our viewers value this program. This really is a critical time for Mosaic. So when you're done watching this episode, consider making a donation and do your part to keep reporting like this alive. Thank you.
The Palestinian President Mahmoud Abbas reiterated in Paris that the Palestinian Authority refuses to reopen peace negotiations with Israel if Tel Aviv does not stop its settlement policy.
We've said this before and we reiterate that we're completely ready to reopen the peace negotiations pertaining to the final status issues only if Israel stops all of its settlement activities.
Palestinians living in Jaffa fought for reopening a mosque, and they managed to do so despite all the obstacles made by Israel. The history of this mosque traces back to the period before Israel occupied Palestinian lands and displaced the residents of Jaffa. Islamic common properties managed by the Islamic Waqf institution, mosques in particular, were vulnerable to demolishment, desecration, and disfigurement. Amal Sahrani has the report.
The sun hasn't risen yet, but the residents of Jaffa are already gathering under the streetlights in a humble celebration for the reopening of a 170-year-old mosque. This old mosque has returned with its unique minaret and its grey color to reflect a 49-year-long story of banishment and displacement in the occupied city of Jaffa.
Praise God, we are witnessing the reopening of this mosque. which is the seventh mosque in Jaffa.
Joy broke through the darkness of the night and the injustice of the occupation. The Israeli authorities took over this old mosque and turned it into a plastic factory for 30 long years. After the factory had been closed for 13 years, the mosque faced the risk of being demolished. The residents of Jaffa, led by the Sikh family, which the mosque is named after, have not given up despite the long battles in Israeli courts. They were determined to renovate the mosque and reopen it.
This gives us hope to cooperate again in the future to return the other Islamic common properties to serve the Muslims and achieve justice. Muslims have a right to have mosques where they want to worship God.
Rights, a word that has fallen, or more precisely, has never existed in the Israeli dictionary. But rights have returned to their owners, at least here. Worshipping has returned to this long-missed mosque, where Muslims who couldn't say their prayers in here for decades have come back to pray.
According to an Israeli source, before he considers a 9-month settlement freeze, Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu will approve the construction of hundreds of housing units in Israeli settlements in the West Bank. The Palestinian Authority refused Netanyahu's plan and called for a stopping of all forms of settlement expansions. Palestinians believe that the initiative of freezing Israeli settlements in exchange for normalizing relations between Arab states and Israel will only serve the Israeli agenda within the region.
These destructive signs were left by the state of settlements that Netanyahu is trying to create in the West Bank. Hundreds of settlers raided the towns of Maghayir and Tormos Aya, north of Ramallah. They pulled more than 400 olive trees and destroyed the land. More importantly, all this happened while the occupation soldiers were watching and provided protection for the settlers.
Every day they try to expand towards our town. They want to impose a new reality in this area. They want to pull all the trees and plants so that they can claim it as an empty land, which will make it easier for them to control the land and expand the settlement.
Despite talks about the possibility that Tel Aviv may freeze the construction of settlements, Netanyahu's office confirmed that he will approve hundreds of settlement units before considering a partial freeze on settlements for a few months. Of course, a settlement freeze would not include the thousands of settlement units that are already under construction.
Accepting the initiative to place a temporary freeze on settlements means that Arab states in principle accept Israeli settlements. Settlement expansion must be completely stopped. According to the statements we've been hearing, we believe that there will be an initiative to completely stop settlement activities in exchange for a peace plan that will bring a peaceful political solution within 2 years.
However, it seems that the United States has promised Tel Aviv that if it freezes settlement expansion and returns to the negotiation table, some Arab states will normalize their economic relations with it. This American promise will encourage Netanyahu and his cabinet to soften the tone of their statements.
Normalizing Arab relations with Israel in exchange for a settlement freeze means that the Israeli agenda is being served. This also means that the Western view is being implemented. Israel is being paid in advance for unguaranteed peace and even for an unguaranteed settlement freeze. Israel can change its position at any second.
Consequently, this is a very good deal for Netanyahu. Netanyahu will be able to trade with Arab states, which will open many doors for Israel in exchange for a very cheap price. He will only give crumbs to the Palestinians. Faris Sarafandi, Al-Alam, occupied Ramallah.
Joining us is writer and political analyst Nihad Abu Ghushi from Ramallah. Can you comment about what was reported in the Jerusalem Post today? Netanyahu plans to build hundreds of settlement units in the West Bank before considering the temporary settlement freeze that the Americans are demanding. Can you comment on this?
As you said, Netanyahu may accept a settlement freeze, but this is not guaranteed. Israel is delaying the freeze due to American leniency, which helps Netanyahu take advantage of time. He is racing against time because the settlement freeze may last up to 9 months or more. The Israeli government continues the construction of new settlements, expands existing settlements, and is still going forward in the process of Judifying Israel. Probably this is even more dangerous, but all these measures are being taken simultaneously to impose new realities that make future negotiations useless. Netanyahu is imposing the results of future negotiations by constructing more settlements and dividing the West Bank. What will be left for the Palestinians are disconnected pieces of land on which the Palestinians are supposed to build their state. This is very dangerous. I do not know if this blow will kill the option of a future political solution, but I'm certain that any future political solution will not survive other blows. The peace process has already suffered from many lethal blows. Netanyahu, therefore, is killing the foundation of any political solution in the future.
Remaining in that region, Israeli forces have shot 2 journalists during a weekly protest against the construction of a separation barrier in the West Bank village of Bil'in. Our correspondent has said Israeli forces shot those journalists in the leg with live bullets. Israeli guards also used tear gas to disperse the protesters attending the ritual weekly opposition to the construction of the illegal barrier. West Bank villages have become symbols of resistance to the barrier construction over the past 2.5 years. Palestinians believe the apartheid wall is meant to annex more of their land. In 2004, the International Court of Justice issued an advisory opinion calling for the removal of the barrier and compensating Palestinians for all damages.
Get more news about the Middle East online at linktv.org/Mosaic. The Mosaic webpage offers a complete archive of Mosaic programs, program transcripts, the Mosaic video podcast, and the Mosaic Intelligence Report, a weekly analysis of the hottest stories from the Middle East. The views expressed on Mosaic are those of the participating broadcasters, not Link TV or its sponsors. The production of Mosaic is made possible with the support of viewers like you. Thank you.
This program is brought to you by Link TV for educational and non-commercial use only. Link TV is the only U.S. network dedicated to global and national news, uncompromising documentaries, and diverse cultural programs. Programs which connect you to the world.